Om Sadashiva-Samarambham Shankaracharya-Madhyamam Asmadacharya-Paripurvam Vande Paramparam Yada Vidya-Vilasena Bhautika-Srishtayah paramaa Satchidananda Vigraham. So we were discussing about jaati in the previous class. Jaati is defined in a particular manner by the Nyaya-Vaisheshika. So in the Nyaya-Vaisheshika darshana, they categorize the entire Srishti into 7 things. Dravya, Guna, Karma, Samanya, Vishesha, Samavaya, Abhava. Abhava also is a category for them. And in that Samanya is also what is known as jaati. And they define this Samanya in a particular manner. Now that also we don't accept. So Nityatve Sati being eternal, Aneka Samavetatvam. So in many different individuals, if a particular characteristic inheres being eternal, that is called as a jaati or a samanya according to them. Now this definition we don't accept because particularly Nityatvam itself is a problem. Okay? Other than Brahman, nothing else can be really Nitya. So we don't accept that.
Shinji, can you repeat the definition of jaati, please?
Yeah, jaati is defined as Nityatve Sati Aneka Samavetatvam. It's there in Tarka Sangraha also. You can check it out. So being eternal is something inheres in many individuals. Okay, a characteristic, let us say. That is called jaati according to the Nyaya-Vaisheshika, which we don't accept. So for them, even if all the individuals are gone, jaati will still exist because it is nitya. For us, we simply say that the sum total of all the characteristics of a particular individual can become a jaati. Okay, there is nothing specially called jaati separately, which is eternally existing. So that we cannot accept, because the only eternal thing for us is Brahman. Nothing else can be eternal or nitya. So not only do the Nyaya-Vaishešikas define the samanya or jaati like this, but further also they analyze which characteristics or which visheshanas can become a jaati. Okay, because for example you say gotvam means cowness, then ashwatvam means harshness, let us say. Now gotvam and ashwatvam can become jaati, no problem, because gotvam and ashwatvam are totally mutually exclusive. Where there is gotvam, there cannot be ashwatvam or harshness, and where there is cowness, there cannot be harshness, and where there is harshness, there cannot be cowness. Like this, there is no problem in mutually exclusive visheshanas, you can say, correct? Like gotvam and ashwatvam. But where the problem comes for them is, if two characteristics, okay, are sometimes they are together, sometimes they are, or in some vastus they are not there together. Okay, in some cases they are together, in some cases they are not together. So it is more like a overlapping sets. Then such characteristics cannot become a jaati. This is the Nyaya-Vaisheshika's own definition. And that dosha, they call it sankarya. Okay. In fact, they do not have a problem if something is a complete superset of a subset. For example, cowness and animalness, let us say. So, gotvam, pashutvam. Pashu meaning here animal in general, let us say. This pashutvam is a complete superset of gotvam. Both can be a jati. There is no problem in that. Where they have a problem is, last time I gave you an example, correct? There is a bhutatva and murtatva. Now, bhutatvam means elementness or whatever. See, we have a 5 elemental model. Panchabhutas are there, correct? So, Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Apaha, Prithvi, these are all bhutas, so they have bhutatvam. Then murtatvam means being limited actually. Something which is not vibhu or all pervasive is called murta. This murtatvam is there in 4 bhutas. Vayu, Agni, Apaha, Prithvi. But it is not there in Akasha because Akasha is vibhu. Akasha is all pervasive. According to the Nyaya-Vaisheshika, understand that. Because we don't accept the all pervasiveness of Akasha also. Because Shruti is very clear that Akasha also is born from the Atma. So, Atma actually pervades the Akasha. So, it is not the other way around. So, Akasha also for us is not completely or absolutely all pervasive. But relatively, it is all pervasive, you can say, the objective world. So, this Akasha is not Murta. So, it doesn't have Murtatvam. But Akasha has Bhutatvam. Now, you take any other object in this Srishti, all of them are limited, correct? Most of them are limited at least. So, another example they normally take of Manas or mind. Mind is limited or Murta, but it is not a Bhuta. So, when you look at these 2 characteristics, Bhutatvam and Murtatvam, they are present together in the 4 Bhutas. And Murtatvam is absent in Akasha and Bhutatvam is absent in Manas. So that being the case, they are having an overlapping relationship with each other, correct? So such overlapping characteristics cannot become a jaati because there is a mixing up is there, sankarya is there. So when such a dosha is there, we cannot accept such characteristics as jaati. This is the contention of the old Nyaya-Vaishešikas. Okay. Now, this particular dosha only is being talked about here because here the author is talking about this Parvato Vanniman. So, mountain is having fire. Now this knowledge, in this knowledge, we say that mountain is Pratyaksha because it is visible, correct? Mountain is visible to the eyes, so it is Pratyaksha. But fire in the mountain is not directly visible. Only smoke is visible. So we infer the fire. So even though we say mountain is having fire, Parvato Vanniman. But in that, mountain is Pratyaksha, fire alone is inferred, correct? This Anumana. So like this, in that knowledge we say that there is both Pratyakshatvam and Parokshatvam together. The Nyaya-Vaisheshika does not like this. Why? Because for them the entire mountain is having fire itself entirely is a inference. It is Paroksha. Because if we accept in that particular cognition that mountain is having fire, their mountain is Pratyaksha, fire is Paroksha. The problem for the Nyaya-Vaisheshika will be Pratyakshatvam and Parokshatvam cannot become jaati, because in some cases they will exist together like this. In other cases they will not exist together. So Sankarya dosha will come. So we give an explanation like that, which is also very commonsensical, I think, because everybody's experience is that I can see the mountain directly. Fire I can't see, but I infer the fire. So there is nothing wrong in this. That alone makes sense also, normally speaking. But when we give an explanation like that, the Nyaya-Vaisheshika raises this point saying that if Parokshatva and Pratyakshatva or Aparokshatva, correct? Both of them are there in one knowledge, like Parvato Vanniman, then there cannot be any jaati. This Pratyakshatvam and Parokshatvam cannot become jaati. In their terminology, they call such characteristics as upaadhi. Okay, this also you have to understand. Whatever characteristics due to the jati badhaka doshas, okay, they cannot really become jati. They are all called as upaadhi. For example, even akashatvam is called an upaadhi, not a jati. Because akasha is only one individual alone is there, correct? So aneka samavetatvam is not there. So akashatvam cannot become a jati. So according to their definition, aneka samavetatvam has to be there. In many individuals, a characteristic has to inhere for it to become a jati. If only one akasha is there in the entire Srishti, akashatvam is there only in one individual. So there the jati and vyakti are one and the same. So such characteristics are not counted as jati according to them. That is called upaadhi. Similarly, this murtatvam and bhutatvam, which I explained to you, they are also not considered as jati, but they are called upaadhi because they are having a overlapping kind of existence. So they are there together in some cases. They also exist independently otherwise. So due to different types of doshas, there are 6 such jati badhaka doshas they talk about, which I briefly explained also already last week. So if any of the doshas are there and a characteristic cannot become a jati, it is called upaadhi. So this usage of upaadhi is a very technical usage by the Nyaya-Vaisheshika. It is their own paribhashika shabda. Okay. It is not in keeping with what we normally define as upaadhi. So they propose two things called jaati and upaadhi like this. Now we actually do not accept it. So that is what here it is said. See, nacha evam ekatra jnane parokshatva aparokshatvayoho abhibhakame tayoho jatitvam nasyat iti vachyam. So we are telling the Nyaya-Vaisheshika, don't come and tell me that in one place or in one jnanam both paroksha and aparoksha, if both are there or both are accepted, then this parokshatvam and aparokshatvam cannot become a jati. Don't raise this as an objection to me. Why? Because the answer is very simple. Because we simply say ishtatvat. Because that's what I want. Because I don't accept your definition of jati and upaadhi and all that. It is your own kalpitam, your own imagination only. I don't accept that. So we say jatitva upaadhitva paribhashayaha sakala pramana agocharataya apramanikatva. So this jatitvam, upaadhitvam, these things which you define, they have no basis in any pramana, in any valid means of knowledge. So they are not known through any of the known pramanas. So they are all only apramanikam. So because they are apramanikam, we do not accept your definition of jati and upaadhi. So further, this is now explained. So the explanation is gataha ayam ityadi pratyaksham hi ghatatwadi sadbhave manam. So when we have a cognition, this part. So when we have that cognition is a pramana for partness. Because partness is there, that's why we are seeing something as this part. But that does not establish the fact that partness is a jati which is eternal. Understand that. So partness we accept, but we do not accept partness as a jati. That's what the author here says. Ghatatwadi sadbhave manam natu tasya jatitve api. So the cognition, this part, establishes the existence of partners, but it does not establish that partners is eternal and therefore it is a jati. Understand that. So it is not a means of knowledge for establishing any jati. Okay. Further, what do we say? Jatitva rupa sadhaka anumanasyapi anavakashat. So, first of all, we cannot establish anything known as jati itself. See, to say that the mountain has fire, you should know first something called fire, correct? Fire is the sadhya, mountain is the paksha. But if sadhya itself is not known to you, then how are you going to establish that? Even the anumana you are going to give is also equally imaginary. That's what the author is saying here. The jatitvam, whatever you are talking as jati or samanya, that itself is not established in any manner. Okay? So it is not prasiddha. So jatitva being aprasiddha, whatever any other anumana you give to establish that also does not have any scope here. So your definition of jati itself is wrong. It is not being established by any known means of knowledge. So you cannot really establish it through some anumana also. That is the point here. Now continuing, samavaya asiddhya brahma bhinna sakala prapanchasya anityataya cha nityatva samavetatva ghatita jatitvasya ghatatvadau asiddhescha. So further, this is what I was explaining to you already. Nityatve sati aneka samavetatvam is how they define. So in that nityatvam we cannot accept. Because for us, what is the point here? Brahma bhinna sakala prapanchasya anityataya. So we are very clear. The Shruti is also very clear. Brahman alone is Satyam. Everything else is Nitya. So that the Shruti is repeatedly teaching that in any Upanishad you study, this is very clearly taught. So Brahman alone is Satyam. All other things are only Vacharambanam Vikaro Namadeyam. They are all only Namarupa. Okay, they are all only words. They have no substance. They have no reality. So Brahman alone is Satyam. Brahma bhinna sakala prapanchasya anityataya. The entire world, the entire universe, if you look at it as apart from Brahman, they have no existence. Brahman is the one which is giving existence to all the Namarupa. In the world of gold, if you remove the gold, then there is no existence for bangle or chain or anything. Understand that. So bangle, gold, bangle, chain, etc. can only exist as gold. If you remove the gold, only names and forms are there. There is no substance. There is no reality to that. So similarly here, this nityatva samavetatva ghatita jatitvasya. So eternally inhering in many different individuals. That is how they define. So jati itself is possible according to them only if it is eternally inhering in multiple. Being eternal, it has to inhere in multiple individuals. Such a definition we cannot accept because anything other than Brahman is anitya for us. So there cannot be any jati. So ghatatva and all cannot be called as jati. So in ghatatva there is no jati. Ghatatva is still ghatatva. Partness we accept. If you see a pot, it establishes that there is a partness. But that doesn't make the partness into a jati. So jati is not. Similarly, even they have this concept of samavaya. Samavaya itself is not a category we accept. Okay, Vedanta. So samavaya asiddhya also is talked about here. So the 7 categories which the Nyayikas talk about, in that samavaya is an important thing. So due to samavaya or samavaya sambandha also they call it. So the samavaya sambandha is there between even dravya and guna. So if there is a cloth and if it is a yellow cloth, then the relationship between the cloth and the yellowness is called samavaya sambandha. That is what is called samavaya or inherence, like that in English we translate. So the samavaya also is the imagination of the Nyayika only. So they even say the relationship between a karana and a karya also is samavaya. So the yarn is there, yarn only becomes the cloth. Now they say between the cloth and the yarn, there is something called samavaya sambandha. And the samavaya is treated as a separate category. The sapta padartha, samavaya is very important. But samavaya itself has no pramanyam. Okay, it is not established by the Veda, nor can it be established by any other means. So we don't accept samavaya. So your definition of jati has samavetatvam, correct? If samavaya itself is not accepted, this samavetatvam also is meaningless. Of course, nityatve sati also is meaningless. Both are meaningless, correct? Your entire definition is meaningless. So we cannot accept anything called jati. Is it clear? That is what we are telling here. Because the Vedantins do not accept samavaya. We simply say it is tadatnyam. Tadatnyam means it is one and the same. Cloth is nothing but yarn only, correct? You cannot remove the yarn and then still have something called cloth. It is meaningless actually. Because the very existence of cloth is nothing but the existence of the yarn only. You cannot claim that there is something called cloth which is independent of the yarn and both of them have a sambandha called samavaya, which doesn't make any real sense. So we don't accept samavaya, we don't accept anything as nitya other than Brahman. So your definition of jati as nityatve sati aneka samavetatvam, we cannot accept. So evameva upaadhitvam nirasaniyam. Upaadhitvam also is obviously should be discarded, because any characteristic which cannot become a jati, they call it upaadhi, like akashatvam, bhutatvam, murtatvam and all these are. Even that is meaningless, because their definition of upaadhitvam is dependent on their definition of jati. Since we don't accept jati, we don't accept their concept of upaadhi also. Both of them have to be discarded. So there is no problem. I can happily say in Parvato Vanniman, Parvata is Pratyaksha, Vanni is Anumeya. Okay? Like that, I can say that and there is no problem for me. Because I don't accept Pratyakshatvam and Parokshatvam as jati. Okay. So that is what is now summarized. Parvato Vanniman Ityado Parvatamshe Vanyamshe cha Antakarana Vritti Veda Angikarena Tattad Avachedaka Vedena Parokshatva Aparokshatvayoho Ekatra Chaitanya Vrittau Na Kaschit Virodaha. So this is our final standpoint. So what do we say? In the knowledge, mountain is having fire. With respect to the mountainness, the Antakarana Vritti is different. With reference to the fire, the Antakarana Vritti is different. The nature of the Antakarana Vritti is different. So, with reference to the mountain Avachinna Chaitanya and the Antakarana Vritti Avachinna Chaitanya being one and the same, mountain becomes Pratyaksha. But with reference to the fire, Antakarana Vritti cannot reach the fire. Antakarana Vritti can only reach smoke. From there, we in our mind do the inference. So the inference also is a Vritti, but it is there in the mind. The inference Vritti really does not have access to the fire. So the fire Vishaya, the Vishaya Chaitanya of the fire is different from the Antakarana Vritti, which is the one which is establishing that. So that is why it is an indirect knowledge. There is no abhedatvam there. So that being the case, fire is inferential and mountain is directly perceptible, because there are the mountain vritti and the anumana vritti, or the inference vritti which establishes the fire, are of two different nature. They are two different things. So therefore, with reference to those vrittis, one can be direct or paroksha, another can be indirect aparoksha, and it can be there in the same cognition. So there is no virodha or contradiction in this for us. It is perfectly acceptable. So further, tathacha tattad indriya yogya vartamana vishaya avachinna chaitanya abhinnatvam tattad akara vritti avachinna jnanasya tattadamshe pratyakshatvam. So now this is the final, almost the final definition of pratyaksha with reference to jnana. Okay, jnana prayojakam pratyaksham is what? That is what now, after all this analysis, we are now giving a complete definition. So what is that? Tattad indriya yogya. So the vishaya which is being revealed by this knowledge should be indriya yogyam. Okay. Further, it has to be present right now. Vartamanatvam also is very important. Otherwise, smriti can also come into the picture. So, indriya yogyatvam also is important, because otherwise this dharma or surabhi chandanam, even though the chandana is there in a distance, by looking at it you can say surabhi, but surabhi means it, but still eyes have no access to the fragrance. So indriya yogyatvam also is important for being pratyaksha. So indriya yogya, vartamanatvam, these two are important. So tattad indriya yogya vartamana vishaya avachinna chaitanyam. Okay. So the vishaya avachinna chaitanyam, the chaitanyam which is conditioned by a vishaya which is indriya yogya and which is currently or right now present. Now that Vishaya Chaitanya has to be abhinna, has to be non-different from what? From the antakarana vritti avachinna Chaitanya. Okay. So the Chaitanya which is conditioned by the antakarana vritti and the Chaitanya which is conditioned by the object which is currently present and which is Indriya Yogya has to be non-different. So it is like I told you, two parts are there within one another. That means the space which is conditioned by both of them are one and the same, correct? But if the two parts are placed in two different places, at least in Vyavahara we can say this part space is different from the other part space. They both are not one and the same. But if you put one part into the other, then there is only one space given with reference to both the parts, correct? Similarly here, if Vishaya Avachinna Chaitanyam and Antakarana Vritti Avachinna Chaitanyam are non-different, when they two are one and the same, then only the knowledge which takes place is called direct knowledge or Pratyaksha Jnanam. So, Tattadamshe Pratyakshatvam. So, in whichever form this vritti takes, with regards to that form, the knowledge becomes a direct knowledge. Okay. So, this is the summary. You can take this as our considered position after all this analysis. So, this sentence you can note down actually. Okay. Now, we are going to go into the next definition, because initially we said that the word pratyaksha has two different usages. It can denote knowledge, where the knowledge has to be a direct knowledge, or it can denote an object the object also can be an object which is directly known. So the Pratyaksha word usage can be with reference to knowledge or it can be with reference to the object. Now that second usage we are now defining, Dvitiye. So Dvitiye means here Vishaya Prayojakam we are going to talk about. So Ghatadehe Vishayasya Pratyakshatvam tu Pramatra Abhinnatvam. So now how are we defining the usage of Pratyaksha with reference to objects like Ghata? So there we say the Ghata has to be non-different from the knower, Pramata. So now how did we define Pramata? Because initially, if you remember, we said that three different Chaitanya is there. Yeah, as though Chaitanya, understand this. Conditioned Chaitanya, we said there is a Vishaya Chaitanya, Pramana Chaitanya and Pramatra Chaitanya. Vishaya Chaitanya means the Chaitanya which is conditioned by the objects. Pramana Chaitanya is the Antakarana Vritti Avachinna Chaitanya. The Chaitanya which is conditioned by the modification of your mind, which is taking the form of a particular Vishaya. Third is the Chaitanya which is conditioned by the entire Antakarana itself, because the Antakarana as a upaadhi is the Jiva upaadhi. So Chaitanyam from the standpoint of the Antakarana only is the knower or the Ahankara also. So here we are now defining the Pratyakshatvam of the Vishaya as Pramatra Abhinnatvam. That means Pramatra Chaitanyam and the Vishaya Chaitanyam has to be one and the same. Okay. So that is the definition here. For Jnana we said Vishaya Chaitanyam and Antakarana Vritti Avachinna Chaitanyam. Here Vishaya Chaitanya and Antakarana Chaitanya have to be one and the same. So Vritti Avachinna Chaitanya, Vishaya Avachinna Chaitanyam and Antakarana Avachinna Chaitanyam, which is Pramata, have to be one and the same. That is how we are talking about here. So when we say, but he is initially saying Pramatra Abhinna, that means the object itself should be non-different from the knower. Like that, initially a statement is given. So now an objection comes for this. Nanu Katham Ghatadehe Antakarana Avachinna Chaitanya Abhedaha. So Purva Pakshi is asking, how can, because you said Pramata is Antakarana Avachinna Chaitanya, how can the Ghata and the Antakarana Avachinna Chaitanya be one and the same? Because we say Aham Idam Pashyami. So I see the pot, means I am different from the pot. So that being the case, how can you say that they both are Abhinna or non-different? See, iti Bheda Anubhava Virodhat. So the Bheda Anubhava is there. I see pot. I am different from pot. That is the experience. That being the case, how can you say pot and the knower I are non-different? So like this, Purva Pakshi is asking. So now the answer is given for that. So what does the author say here? Iti chet uchyate Pramatra Abhedaha nama na tavad aikyam. So when we say Pramatra Abheda, non-different from the Pramata, we do not mean identity. It is not Aikya. But Kintu Pramatra Satta Atirikta Sattaka Tattva Abhavaha. So what do we mean here is, there is no existence of the pot other than the existence of the knower. So the knower's existence and the pot's existence are one and the same. Like that, we bring in a definition here. So this is further explained. So tatha cha ghatadehe swa avachinna chaitanya adhyastataya Vishaya Chaitanya Satta eva Ghatadi Satta. So, Ghata is nothing but an Adhyastha. It is a superimposition on Chaitanya. Okay? And so, the Vishaya Chaitanya, when we say Chaitanya is the one which is giving existence to the Vishaya. Vishaya doesn't have any existence of its own. Okay? For its very existence, it depends on the consciousness. Consciousness alone is, and that isness or the existence itself is given to the names and forms or any object. There is no objective reality. In fact, in language we have wrong usage. We say that existent part. Like that we are using existence as an adjective, which itself is a wrong usage really. In fact, it has to be the other way around. You have to say party existence, clayey existence, tably existence, whatever. So it is not existent table, existent clay, existent pot like that. It is the other way around. Existence alone is, these names and forms are actually adjectives or qualifications for that. But anyway, the objects do not have their own existence. They depend on Chaitanyam. Chaitanyam alone is Satyam. Okay. So Ghatadi Satta is nothing but the Satta of the Chaitanya. That is the idea here. So the existence of the pot is nothing but the existence of the Vishaya Chaitanya or the consciousness. Of course, here we have Shruti Pramana for that. Nobody can say we don't have a Pramana for this. Our whole basis is that everything has its basis in consciousness. So both the subject and the object are nothing but consciousness. That is what we are seeing here. How beautifully the author is taking that, whatever is revealed by the Shruti, and the whole theory of knowledge is developed based on that. That's what you have to appreciate here. See, even modern science is defective in this. Because modern science is only looking at the objective world. It has no idea about the observer or the subject. Even psychology is supposedly a subjective discipline, but even there they try to study the mind objectively. So even there they have some problem. In fact, they even have problems defining what is mind, what is consciousness and all that. So modern science has its own problem. And to further complicate this, there are issues with reference to quantum physics. Once quantum physics and wave particle duality, all these things came into the picture, there is even more confusion, even within modern science you can say, because the nature of observation determines whether a quantum system becomes a wave or a particle. Understand that. If you observe it as a wave, it is a wave. If you observe it as a particle, it is a particle. But it is the same quantum system. That is where confusion is in modern science also. That means the observer is very important. Based on the observer only, a quantum system collapses. Now this scientific reality is known to most of the scientists. So that is why they even have a paradox. Because if the observer determines the quantum system's probability of whatever, whether it becomes a wave or a particle, then who is this observer? That has to be defined, correct? If you define the observer as the brain, then the problem is brain itself is a quantum system. Then who will collapse the brain? Like that it will become an infinite regress. Is that clear? This is called as von Neumann's paradox in science. So they don't know how to define this observer. Now for us there is no problem. Everything has its basis only in consciousness. The observer also is consciousness. The observed object also is consciousness. So our whole theory of knowledge is based on this only. Is that clear? So whatever we are talking about here, it does not really contradict even scientific theories, let us say, because scientific theories are based only on the objective world. So within that boundary condition, they will say, okay, perception means light has to hit an object and then it has to reflect and come and again hit your retina, and then from there an electrical impulse is fired through the optic nerve and it reaches a particular spot in your brain, and then something happens, correct? Neurologically something happens and vision takes place. Okay, so I hope Ram can correct me if I am wrong. So this is the kind of explanation which is given, correct, medically, or you normally talk to some cognitive psychologist and all that. Of course, in between they may even bring something about the mind, or they may not. So, but even this is not contradicting us. It can be taken as complementary also. Thus, we can still say only when the light is there anyway you can see, correct? The yogyata we are defining here. So, there has to be a conducive environment for the antakarana vritti to go and form itself in the form of the object, correct? So for that all these things are sahakari, they enable. So it doesn't really contradict or anything. Modern theories also can be taken as complementary, but what we say alone is complete. Understand that. So I hope you get this point clearly. So here we say that parimana, okay, not this, I think I have come here. So iti chet uchyate pramatra abhedaha nama na tavad aikyam kintu pramatra satta atirikta satta katva abhavaha.
You looked at
Atiriktam means other than. Okay. Pramatra satta atirikta satta katva abhavaha means there is no existence of the part or any object for the matter other than the existence of the pramata. Okay, that is what we mean by pramatra abhedaha. Now that is explained here. Tatacha ghatadehe swavachinna chaitanya adhyastataya. Okay, so this point, this sentence also I read correct. Vishaya chaitanya satta eva ghatadi satta. So I was telling you Vishaya chaitanya satta. So the chaitanya satta alone is the satta of objects like ghata. It doesn't have any existence of its own. So it is the same. See, that is what further explanation is given here. Adhisthana satta atiriktayaha aropita sattayaha anangikara. So the existence of the superimposed is not something different from the existence of the adhisthana, correct? So adhisthana means, for example, rope. Rope is the adhisthana. If you see sarpa on the rajju, so if you see a snake on the rope, snake is aropitam or superimposed, and rope is the adhisthana. Now here you cannot argue the snake exists or the existence of the snake is independent of and different from the existence of the rope. So we do not accept that. We say that in the case of superimposition, the existence of the superimposition is the same as the existence of the existence of the substratum. Okay. So wherever the superimposition happens, there whatever substance is there, that existence alone is the existence of the superimposed object also. Of course, this applies to even pot and clay. So we say pot also is nothing but aropitam. It's only namarupa. So mithya itself means dependent, something which is dependently existent. So it depends on its very existence for something else. Such a thing is called mithya for us. Okay. So that is what is said here. Adhisthana satta atiriktayaha. So separate from the satta of the adhisthana, aropita sattayaha anangikara. So we do not accept a separate existence for the superimposed other than the existence of the substratum. Is it clear? So that being the case, Ghata also cannot have a separate existence other than the Chaitanya which is providing that Satta. Because everything has come from this Chaitanyam alone. Further, Vishaya Chaitanyam cha Purvokta Prakarena Pramatri Chaitanyam eva iti Pramatri Chaitanyasya eva Ghatadi Adhisthanataya Pramatri Satta eva Ghatadi Satta na anya iti siddham Ghatadehe aparokshатvam. So now again he is explaining clearly what do we mean by the aparokshатvam or pratyakshатvam of Vishaya, like Ghata. So when we say that an object is pratyaksha, object is directly perceptual, what do we mean by that? We mean that the Vishaya Chaitanyam conditioned by the Vishaya should be the one and the same with the Chaitanya which is conditioned by the knower, correct? For the knowledge usage, we said that the Vishaya avachinna Chaitanyam and pramana avachinna Chaitanyam should be one and the same. Here we are saying the Vishaya avachinna Chaitanyam and the Pramatra avachinna Chaitanyam have to be one and the same. So, and it is one and the same because if the Vishaya is in the range of your Antakarana, okay, because Antakarana can go out through the Indriya, and whatever Vishaya is there within the range of the Antakaranam, there what happens? The Antakarana avachinna Chaitanyam, which is Pramata, and the Vishaya avachinna Chaitanyam become one and the same, like again the same thing, correct? Two parts within one another, then the conditioned space is one and the same. Similarly, here also, wherever the objects are within the range of your antakaranam, the Chaitanya conditioned by your antakarana and the Chaitanyam conditioned by the object becomes one and the same. Whenever this happens, the object becomes Pratyaksha. Is it clear? That is the explanation given here. Okay, so now some more explanation is given with reference to inference. So, what does the author say here? Anumityadi sthaletu antakaranasya vanyadi desha nirgamana abhavena vanyi avachinna chaitanyasya pramatri chaitanya anatmakataya vanyadi satta pramatri sattataha bhinna iti na ativyaptihi. So now, whatever definition we have given, correct? That the Vishaya avachinna chaitanyam and Pramatra avachinna chaitanyam should be one and the same. That does not extend to inference. Okay, that is what is now talked about. So, Animityadi sthale. So, when in the case of inference, what happens? Antakaranasya, your antakarana does not go and reach the fire, correct? So, the antakarana avachinna chaitanya and vanyi avachinna chaitanya, fire, the consciousness conditioned by your mind and the consciousness conditioned by the fire are not one and the same, because your mind does not reach the fire, correct? That is the reason why you have to do the inference, in fact. So, in the case of inference, the vanyi avachinna chaitanyam, which is the Vishaya chaitanya, and Pramatra avachinna chaitanya, which is the antakarana avachinna chaitanya, do not come in contact with one another. Therefore, we cannot say that the satta of the vanni and the satta of the pramata are one and the same. So they are different only in this case. So our definition does not overflow into the case of inference and things which are known through inference. So if you know fire through inference, that fire is still not Pratyaksha, it is Paroksha only. So that is what is explained here. So further, another doubt is raised. In fact, the same doubt was raised even with reference to the Pratyakshatva of Jnana. Same thing is talked about here also, no? So, nanu evam api dharma adharmadi gochara anumityadi sthale dharma adharmayoho pratyakshatva apattihi dharmadi avachinna chaitanyasya pramatri chaitanya bhinnataya dharmadi sattayaha pramatri satta anatireka. So this again. So now the Purva-Paksha says, see, let us say you are very happy. So then you make an inference. Aha, I am so happy. I must have done some punya. So aham punyavan. Iti, you do an inference, let us say. But the point here is, dharma adharma are nothing but qualities of your antakarana only. Okay, so that means here what happens? The dharma adharma avachinna chaitanya, which is the Vishaya chaitanya, and antakarana avachinna chaitanya, which is the pramatri chaitanya, are there in the same place. That means dharma adharma also should become pratyaksha, but it is not. Dharma, dharma is only paroksha, that everybody accepts. So what do you say? So for that he says, iti chetna yogyattvasyapi vishaya visheshanatva. So here also, in the definition of the pratyaksha of vishaya, yogyatvam has to be added here also. Like we added in the pratyakshatva of jnana, for the pratyakshatva of the vishaya also, yogyatvam is very important. So not all objects can be pratyaksha. Yogyatvam, this capability is very important. Only some objects are capable of being perceptual. Okay. So like this yogyatvam we are adding in this case also, like we did before. So now another Purva Paksha is started, so that we will see next week. Okay. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.